Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're here to talk to you about the Minnesota Wild, the quick recap on what they did in the 2022-23 season, and then we'll jump into the outlook on the upcoming 2023-24 season. Basically, in the 2022-23 season, Minnesota Wild finished 11th overall in the standings. They finished third in their division. They had 46 wins and 103 points. They went on to play the Dallas Stars in the first round of the playoffs, and in typical Minnesota fashion, lost in the first round of the playoffs. I was pretty disappointed because it was, had a bit at stake there. Jaden and myself had a pretty big rivalry all season around Minnesota and Dallas, and I was on the
I
side of
won.
Minnesota, so I lost out on that one, which kind of sucked. Um, but yeah, all in all, Minnesota had a relatively solid season given the fact that, they've had so much cap tied up for so long. It's just beyond a joke at the moment. And they've still got another 2 seasons left. So it's admirable the fact that they keep making the playoffs year in, year out. And yeah, unfortunately, another first round exit for Minnesota, but ultimately another strong season, and they're just edging closer and closer to getting that cap space back, which I think once they get that cap space back, who knows what this team can do, because the fact that they've been so strong with so little cap space for so long, um, yeah, it's just a credit to the management and the team itself. So yeah, that's about it for the recap. I'll hand you over to Jaden now to take you through the upcoming 23 lineup.
Alrighty, so we've got 1.6 mil and free cap. We do have three spots we could fill out if need be. Starting for the lineup, we got Kaprizov, Hartman, and Zuccarello on the first line. Marcus Johansson, Eriksson Ek, and Boldy on the second. Dua, Goudreau, Felino third. Maroon, Rossi, and Duhaime on the fourth. Obviously, Maroon brought in late last year for that trade. Uh, yeah, not much to say to that so far. So I'll go on to the defenders, then we'll go back to it. Middleton, Spurgeon, Brodeen, Faber, John Merrill, and Addison, who is yet to sign, who is an RFA. So we're still waiting on that one for the signing. That's probably where the 1.6 million goes, or some of it anyway. Goalies, you got Gustafsson and Fleury. They're your 1 and 2, either way, however you want to roll them. And then your scratches, you got Patan, Walker, and Goligoski. So notable losses. We obviously see here only one player really brought in via trade, but notable losses we got Mitchell Schaefer, Hicketts, Klingberg, Nyquist, Reeves, Steele, and Sunquist all leaving. So some big names there. Obviously, some of those names aren't as good as they used to be or are not in their prime, but still some big notable names. At least some quality depth, and there's a lot of people leaving there. There's seven, at least four of them are NHL slots in the depth, and they really only brought in Maroon. So they're kind of lacking in their depth department, and it really does come down to 15 mil basically tied up in two players in dead cap in Parise and Suter for at least
Yeah, a
for
couple of
2 more
those
years.
were rentals as well.
Yeah,
So
but you
that's,
you
yeah.
get you get rentals, but it's an interesting point. Like I'll just go through the stats on the right, then we can have a discuss about that. So power play, 15th best in the league, at 21.4%. Penalty kill, 10th best in the league. So they did good on special teams, 82%. The big point that we're going to talk about probably is the goals for. They just not enough goal production, 2.9. 23rd best in the league, and the goals against, very defensive system team that 7th best in the league at 2.6. So do good on the defensive side. They just need goal production. Problem is they don't have really the depth to get that goal production. Like Duhaime, he scored 9 goals, 1 assist in like 50 something games. Like I don't know how a player is scoring 9 goals and only getting 1 assist, but that is what it is. They bring in Maroon, who's not really that that scorer. He's more of that leadership Ryan Reeves' replacement. So that is what it is. I just don't see the goal production to get them from 20th or worse to in the top 16, and that is my biggest concern with this team is I don't see where it comes from, and if they had 15 million more to play around, I definitely could see it, but they just don't have it, and I'll leave it with this question to you. Should they even be going for it with 2 more years of that dead cap? Should they have really been doing a retail rebuild, preparing for end of 2025 and starting to the 2025-2026 season?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we spoke about off air. The other one who's not in notable losses at the moment is Matt Dumba because he's yet to be signed. So that's
actually easy to forget that one.
and that's another loss. I know a lot of people. He was sort of declining in his quality in a sense, and there was a lot of talks about would he be traded out, try to get some assets for him, and with that first round exit, now you sort of look at it and go, man, maybe they should have done that, because instead they lose him for nothing. They lose the likes of Klingberg, who they brought in, so that traded assets for. They lost Nyquist, who they traded for. Ryan Reeves, I don't know how much you're really going to get for Ryan Reeves, but he walks for free. Sam Steele walks for free, and Sundqvist, who you got in as well, walks for free. So, or you traded assets for. So, yeah, it's a weird one. I mean, the Sundqvist one they traded out Greenway for, so I don't really feel like that was ultimately a loss either way. But yeah, it's a tough one because I'm sort of with you there. We were talking off air about how can you like it's admirable that this team keeps making the playoffs, but there's a reason they keep getting kicked out in the first round, and that's because they just don't have it. Like you are $15 million short of your standard cap, which means that instead of 82.5, what's now $83.5 million, you're what 68. That's a massive hit. Like that's three $5 million players basically. That can fill out your second line. Add to your third line. It's just it's incredible to think that these guys have gotten as far as they have with the lack of cap space they have had for so long. But yeah, you do have to ask the question. This team hasn't changed in terms of gotten better. Like they brought in Pat Maroon, who is obviously going to be a big physical presence, and I think he's going to be a much better fit than Ryan Reeves, because I feel like Pat Maroon isn't just that big physical, I'm going to beat someone up. He can play hockey. Ryan Reeves worse, but it just in terms of skill wise, I feel like Pat Maroon's got that. He can get on the scoreboard. So that is a good addition. But again, they lost a lot, and you think majority of them were rentals and stuff. But again, just how does this team right now go from losing in the first round, losing the players that they lost, rentals or just general players, not really adding anything? How does it go from finishing third in the division, losing the first round, to winning a cup? I don't see it. I liked what these, I liked what these guys were doing, other than the fact that they couldn't really get that goal production going. Their goal, like as you mentioned, their goals against phenomenal. Their defense is fantastic. They've got two high quality goaltenders, but they just don't have the goal scoring. They haven't brought in any extra goal scorers, and they don't have money to do anything. So I just don't see the team getting better.
Yeah.
And so for me, especially with the likes of Ryan Hartman, Zuccarello, Foligno, and Fleury, just four off the top of my head, UFAs. I mean, you got Pat Maroon in there as well, but they've just signed him, so you're not going to talk about him you could talk about him being traded for assets, but you got 4 players there. Hartman, you might sign, but what cap do they have? Yep, Zuccarello's coming off, but are they going to try and sign him as well? Like, if you go for it and these guys decide that they don't want to re-sign or whatever it is, you're losing Hartman, Zuccarello, Foligno, Fleury for nothing. You're getting nothing in return, and that
Mm-hmm.
almost like fast tracks your, oh well, we now have to go into a rebuild. And I just don't know, like, is it worth it? Because yeah, at the end of the day, even if they were looking like they're going to make the playoffs next season, and I think they still will, I just don't see the strength in that central to really kick them out. But I really do think management has to look at this and go, is it worth? Is it worth sort of throwing out a couple of these players at the deadline, getting some assets if they're not signed? If Hartman agrees to sign, maybe Zuccarello agrees to sign beforehand, takes a bit of a pay cut to get Hartman that pay increase he's going to get. Maybe you keep them then, but I'm thinking if they're not signed by the trade deadline, you have to at least consider it, because I just don't see this team winning a cup. I just don't
Yeah.
think that they've got enough with them. I mean, Marco Rossi is potentially the big question mark. A lot of people have had big tickets on him for a while. Everyone thought he was going to have a breakout season last season, just didn't happen. Maybe that's what turns this team. Can he be that player that jumps into the lineup and scores 30 goals? I know it's a massive ask on a rookie player, but that's really the only place I see this team, where they could potentially get that uplift from. Boldy could take another step in his game, I guess, but yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, I
You already
feel
got
like
30
they're
goals from
weaker.
Gaboldi though, so like, how much more can you ask
How
for the
much
man?
more?
Like Kaprizov
Yeah.
had 40. How much more? Like, you got, like you said, the Zuccarello situation, which I think is probably the interesting one here, is that obviously he's UFA this year, and you mentioned like maybe he takes a pay cut, so then Hartman can obviously get his pay, but there's no reason that Zuccarello should because of how he's played at Minnesota Wild. He's played absolutely amazing every season, so I feel like he still gets his $5-6 million worth of money, maybe more because the cap goes up,
Oh,
and how that
I mean,
percentage works out.
He's a
Yeah,
$6 million player getting 67 points in 78 games. Like
yeah. You
those
could argue that
those
he's probably more
numbers,
than 6 million, but
yeah, those numbers are getting at least 6 million.
yeah,
Like that's the
but
point now, especially with the cap
yeah.
going up. Like,
But
yeah, you
this
make
is
a
the
great
problem. Like they
point.
got so many UFAs here. They are one of the most aging teams in the league. Really, their average age is around 29. For a team that has these youngsters like Kaprizov, Rossi, Balwadi, etc. Like Kaprizov's not is in his prime. I think he's around 26 something now. Like these people, these players are in their prime, and when 2 years from now, they might still be at the end of their prime. But do you have the team around them at that point? And you're not going to have the chemistry because a lot of these players won't be there, because you just can't keep them there because of the cap situation you're in. And I honestly think you're almost better just you maybe stay with Caprice or Boldy and whatnot, but you start stripping some of these pieces, like essentially
Getting some prospects in.
the whole right side, with is 3 out of the 4 free agents. You got Hartman obviously down the middle, Maroon who they just brought in just as replacement and some leadership. But then you got Fleury that leaves most likely or retires. You got a couple of your scratches there are also UFAs. Like there's so much to add here. I don't know how much of their prospect pool is coming through to replace all these players,
Well,
especially in the timeline that they want right now.
you
And
got Brock Faber, who they think's going to obviously fit in on that second line coming through. You got Callan Addison, who played pretty well last year, is still yet to sign as that RFA. But he's 23. But they are two of the young players. But yeah, in terms of the other ones coming through,
Hmm.
I think one of their next best ones is Wallstead, who's a goaltender.
Hmm. So like they have some depth, but it's just like prospects. I mean, coming through, but I just don't
Mm.
see the replacements in the time that they would need. Like they're kind of in this weird limbo of like we're going for it, yet we can't go for it, but we're going
To the
for it,
full
but
extent.
we have some
Yeah,
prospects. But it's just like
it's
you
cruel.
know you're coming up a team against like the Avs and whatnot with their team, like their teams with all this depth. You know, Nashville doing their retool is going to be completely different, and I feel like they could do crazy things by the time you come out of this. Like, I do worry for this team because I am a big fan of the Wild. I do like a lot of the
Mm.
players that they have on the Wild, just in general, and I just don't see how you do it with this much dead cap. I don't see how you do it at all for even the past years, let alone this year and next year. So I do feel like you do have to pull that plug, um, at least on some of these assets. Don't have to get rid of absolutely everything. I still think you could sit on a Kaprizov, Rossi, and Boldy. Sit on that. Get rid of some of your aging people and just go full youth. Have your Maroons and whatnot for leadership and guidance. Because like you go through some. Let's just go through some of the stats. So they were seventh west in the league for face-offs. You know, they haven't improved
That's
anywhere on their
yeah,
face-offs.
that's not getting improved.
I don't see where that gets improved. And I feel like face-offs is a huge thing, especially in the defensive zone. They were number 6 in regards to the most penalized team in the league, 781 minutes. They were also the number 3 in most penalty minutes taken by opponents. So they gave out as much as they got, but that's still not good enough. You're playing too much special teams, and that comes down to they were taking too many fights. 35 fights in last season. That's fourth most in the league. The highest was Tampa with 37 for comparison, and the least.
And they just picked up the
Yeah,
second most fought player in 2022-2023
yeah,
in Patrick Maroon.
yeah. So they get worse in that regard. They get rid of 5 fights because of Reeves leaving, but they pick up 12 or something because of Maroon. So they're only going to get worse in that department. Obviously, you get Carolina had 5 fights for the season, just in comparison for how big that
Mm.
scale is. The average would have been around 15, 18. So I feel like they need to scale that down. Like I said, the 5th least giveaways to opponents, which was good. 7th for shots blocked total. So their defense is fine. Like defensive system's
Mm.
fine. It's just offense. It's face-offs, stay out of the box, and goals. Basically, it because the special teams are fine, but it's your 5-on-5 of offense, and I don't think they can do it. Therefore, I think you have to retool. I wouldn't call it a rebuild. I'd say a retool, just for 2
Mm.
years. And once that dead cap's gone, you go crazy. So,
Oh,
and you know,
imagine if they had 15 mil right now.
oh well,
Imagine if they
that's
had
a
that cap
whole
space.
second line, or your top pairing D, or your 4 bottom pairing D. So like
Mm.
it's huge. Like it's not
Mm.
nothing to you know. Matthews is looking at getting 13 mil. That's still more than what Matthews is getting. You know, I'm gonna get
Yeah, they could literally bring him into this team.
yeah,
Like,
and still
that's
have some money to get in,
and
like
still
sign
have money
Addison.
to spare, right?
So
Yeah.
yeah, that is how insane it is that like they could add someone of that caliber, McDavid, Matthews, on those huge contracts and be like, it's fine. They could add a Darnell
Mm.
Nurse, and everyone's like, oh, his contract's bad, and and Minnesota would still
That's
have
still,
5 million to spare. So, oh,
yeah.
you're looking at basically a $14.5 million player
Hmm.
who does nothing on your team. That's how you got to look at it.
Yeah.
So I just think you can't trade that person out, obviously. Therefore, you're almost pushed into that point where you have to retool. And Zuccarello, I don't know what he does at the end of the season. Whether he's like 35 or something, he could retire, could not. Um, you obviously got Foligno,
Yeah.
DeHames. Barely depth, I would call it. You know, he's basically a fighter as well. I think he put up like 4 fights, so
Well,
I,
there's a
I,
reason why they only signed him to a 1 year
yeah,
and gave away his RFA status, right? Like,
yeah,
you
but
know,
it's just
he is just a fourth liner.
I just don't see it from the scratches into their bottom six, and
Yeah.
honestly, even into their top six. Like I like the top six in general, but I don't feel like it has enough around it to spark it. There's not enough scoring coming from their defensive side of things with the team they've got now. Like not enough D to offensive movement I see on that line personally, and I don't know. I think you just start looking at like players like Spurgeon and stuff like that, like people that are on over 5 million cap hits, and you just got to start moving. Obviously, he has a no move clause. It'd be hard to move that. He'd have to agree, but those especially the no move clause, you got to start moving. Anyone basically 30 or over, I would have on the trade block with this team, and unfortunately, that's probably half the team.
Mm,
But that
yeah,
is
that's
the
the tough part,
situation they're
isn't
in,
it?
and obviously
Yeah,
you
and
have you have people for leadership for the kids, but yeah.
yeah, I just look, the one thing I don't want to see him do is I don't want to see him go out because this is what I'm probably going to see them do this year. We're going to see them do this year is they're going to probably be about third in the division, and they're going to get it to the trade deadline day. They're going to get a couple of rentals. They'll make some moves, and then they'll go into the playoffs. They'll probably lose in the first round yet again because the team's just not there, and then they're going to lose. They might lose Hartman, Zuccarello, Foligno, Maroon, Fleury, and any other rentals that they sign, they're going to lose them all, or
Mm.
potentially. The Hartman.
Cause
Obviously, these
yeah,
players can re-sign, but there is that potential of losing them for nothing, and then that just puts this team back so far. And then you start to go, oh, they're only 1 year away from getting 15 mil back,
mm,
but they've got no players because they still can't sign anyone. Well, they'll be able to sign, but they're still going to have those cash issues next season.
mm,
So they're only basically signing players to replace the ones that they've lost. But given the cap situation, like I said, Hartman's cap's going to increase. Zuccarello might stay the same. You might get a slight reduction. Like they're not. It's not like you're going to be able to replace these players for the same amount of money they're currently on. You're going to have to spend more. Otherwise, you're going to get worse players.
yeah.
So, yeah, I
Well,
just don't
that's the
see how
thing.
it's going to
When
get better.
when you think of goal scorers, like you're looking at like Tarasenko, like for cheap like goal scorers, you're looking at Tarasenko's and whatnot, and they're still not cheap. They still go for 4 or 5 million because they're sought after, and obviously you don't have the cap for that. So where are you getting the goal scorers? Like it's great if you only needed like some strong depth, some veterancy on your blue line or your forward line. Like it wouldn't be that bad of an issue. But the fact you need goal scoring is the problem because that's where a lot of
Mm-hmm.
money goes, and I don't see how you free up for it. Look, they've got one
Mm.
of the best things in the league in regards to going for a cup. They've got a good defense and system for
And they
that.
got good
Like that,
goaltending.
it's a great foundation, right? Goaltending, defense, like it's a great foundation you can build around. But I don't feel like they've got the assets or space enough to be able to build for the offense. And they
Mm.
got some of the pieces, but some of those pieces are playmakers as well. They're not pure goal scorers. They are, um, rely on their skill more than just their pure shot. I think of
Mm.
Kaprizov, like he's still really good with his shot and whatnot, but it's more skill based. Same with Zuccarello. So I just don't see that sniper that's going to carry you 30 plus goals. And if Kaprizov or anyone gets injured on that top six, I think your season's basically done in regards to going for a cup. There's no depth to cover that at all. You look at Carolina, what they
Well, I
did with
mean,
losing what's his name? Was it Sergachev?
Teravainen, Sergei, uh,
My God, I'm going blank as well.
Sveshnikov, and
Sveshnikov.
Sveshnikov and Teravainen. Yeah,
Yeah,
they
like,
lost
but they still
literally
had
two of
they
the
still
best
had the
wingers.
depth to cover that. Like that's how good Carolina's depth is, and If you had
Mhm.
that happen to Minnesota, I don't see that, and
Well, no,
playoffs cause
like
injuries.
they're two. So just for context here, currently states roster size 20 of 23 on cap friendly, and that is because Callan Addison isn't signed, so that's one of them. However, Nicholas Patan and Samuel Walker are not currently listed as on their roster. So that cap hit of $1.6 million is not currently sitting on their roster. So that 1.6 cap hit that we have, if that all goes to Addison, they literally have to play with one scratch.
Hmm.
So it just, yeah, it makes it really difficult for this team to literally do anything.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, they're not even going to be able to really swap
Hmm.
players in and out of the lineup unless of an injury. Like, if there's an injury, sure. But if there's no injury and they can't bring someone up for replacement, they can't do it because they don't have the cap. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It's going to be a tough season for Minnesota, I think. But again, because of that weaker Central, I still think they'll make the playoffs.
Well,
But they
it
just
still looks like they
at
make the
what
playoffs,
cost?
but I feel like out of all the teams we've probably covered so far, maybe besides a Tampa or something like that, from all the teams that made the playoffs last year, it's probably one of my favorites to not make the playoffs just because they don't really get better. If anything, they're getting worse because a lot of their players are aging. Obviously, like Dumber and whatnot have gone. And I just don't see that depth coming in to fulfill that. Meanwhile, it is a weaker division, but you still do have like a Nashville wild card that could do what they
Mm.
do. I think St. Louis could definitely rebound from the horrible season that they had. So it might not look like they have competition, but it's a brand new season, and I feel like they could definitely be in
Logan
that.
Cooley at
Yeah,
Arizona.
and if they don't,
What does he do?
yeah, and if they don't make this playoffs, I don't know what to make. Like, how bad do you tear it down at that point? Because
Well, the other
that's the
thing I
scary
could
part.
throw out here is what if Minnesota aren't in a playoffs position? Could
Well,
that be the
yeah,
best thing for them? Because then they have to think about either re-signing Hartman, Zuccarello, and alike, or they have to actually seriously consider trading them out
yeah,
because it's not like they're going on a cup like a playoff run. They If they're not going to make the playoffs, then that kind of potentially makes the decision easier, right?
mm,
Like, oh, we're not actually going to make playoffs. We've had a shocking season. I don't see it though. That's the thing. I still think that they'll make it, and I feel like they're gonna do the same thing as last year. They're gonna go out, get a bunch of rentals, and they're gonna get kicked out in the first
yeah, and
round.
it depletes your
And
asset
yeah,
base, especially if you're going to lose Zuccarello at the end of the season.
yeah,
Um, and look, he's defying aging at the moment, but generally you're going to hit a wall, especially if you're constantly going through playoffs. Obviously, they're not obviously going far in the playoffs at the moment, not going past round one. But if they start going and he does resign, he's just going probably to deteriorate because injuries just creep up because playoffs is different game. And that's another point we haven't really even touched. Is this even a playoff team? There's a lot of skill here. Basically, only the bottom six is more thuggery, uh, fighting style, and Maroon, Dehame, etc. Felino. But there's no
bro.
Kachuk or something like that where your top six is still really strong. Like Kaprizov's a little bit of pushover. Zuccarello is pretty small. Um, I actually can't remember how I feel about Boldy. I haven't seen him in a long time. I haven't even really talked about him. So I just don't think they have that.
He's 6'2", 196.
Yeah, doesn't mean you use it though. That's the thing. He
No,
could use it though. I haven't seen him play in a bit. But that's the thing. That's where I worry. They're relying too much of that strength at the bottom, and there's no goal scoring at the bottom. Relying and then just your skill players going, having free reign. And yeah, I worry for it. I I don't even know what's best for them if they do or don't make the playoffs. And I even if they don't make the playoffs, I don't even know if they do the retool that I'm proposing anyway. I still think they'll probably go, no, we can bounce back next year. And then, it doesn't really matter from there on because soon that cap comes off. So, yeah, I'm worried for Minnesota Wild fan because, even if I make the playoffs, I probably have no faith coming out of round one, let alone if we pass that. It's like, yeah, we passed that milestone. But then do you even pass round two? That is the problem because their division's weak, but it's very top heavy. The Avs are really strong. On the other side, you got Vegas who just won the cup. You got other teams that are coming through in regards to Arizona that could be that wild card because you got Clayton Keller who's really probably the least talked about player in the league just because he's in Arizona, but he is a star. Cooley just signed there. Like they could be that team that comes out of nowhere that was like the New Jersey that of last year. And yeah, that's what you got to worry about. Like everyone just thinks, oh, this is how the season ended last year. That's how it's going to end this year. And every season will always prove it. There's always at least one, probably even two, that just out of nowhere just surprise you and make playoffs. New Jersey did it last year. Buffalo almost did it. It's just going to be that way. And St. Louis did the opposite and dropping out. So yeah, if any of those teams do a surprise season, I don't see Minnesota Wild being strong enough to hold against it if that does happen.
No, I think you nailed it on the head there. I think it's going to be an interesting season for Minnesota. I'm not sure it's a positive one. Even if either way, basically, it's either they don't make playoffs and they sort of get some assets for these players that are ultimately potentially on the way out, or they make the playoffs. And I just, again, like you said, don't think this team's strong enough to go anywhere with it. So yeah, I feel like these next 2 years, unfortunately, because of what past management have done, and another reason why they've restricted the max contract to 8 years. Yeah, it hurts so much, and hopefully they don't cause this franchise too much damage in the next 2 seasons whilst waiting to get that $15 million back. Because if they can have themselves in a good enough position come the end of the 24-25 season going into the next one, with that cap space, this team could do, like, this franchise could do so much. The management just has to be really careful with what it does over the next couple of seasons, because if it kills it, it won't matter that you have $15 million left. You've got nothing to do. You can't do anything with it anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Oh, it's kind of
it's going to be a
surprising that
bumpy road.
they weren't. They gave 1.1 to Dehane, but they didn't go and try and give a chance on someone like a Yamamoto. I feel like those are the type of players they need to go for. Those players that people have given up hope on, and then they try and rebound their career. I just don't know of many players going to Minnesota to rebound their career. I'm not sure if they.
As a Dino, even like, he didn't sign for too much, and he went to San Jose. So, yeah, interesting, but I think it's going to be a bumpy ride for Minnesota fans.
So all up, great defense. Need better offense in regards to goals. If they get that done, who knows what they could be. But probably my X factor to miss the playoffs just purely because they haven't improved enough, in my opinion. But yeah, if we'll leave it there, don't forget to like the video and help support us. And leave a comment below what you think of Minnesota Wild. Should they do a retool? Should they keep going for it? And how does this $15 million dead cap play out for them over the next 2 years? And don't forget to subscribe, leave all notifications on, so you get notified of our new videos that will drop similar to this fashion and more NHL content overall. But till next time, catch you guys.
Good night, guys.